Due to a catastrophic camera failure, I'm afraid that the cutting process for the Gladys disc was not recorded. As you can imagine, I can't undo what has already been done, so for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to redraw it on another disc just so I could show you part of the process of cutting and removing some of the contact paper, just for the sake of the tutorial. I'm not going to do the whole thing, obviously, but just enough to give you an idea of how I go about doing it, which is nothing spectacular, but to make a complete instructional video, I probably should. So if you notice that the disc that I'm using is not quite the same as the one we originally started with, there's a reason for that. But the final product will be, so don't be confused. That's why. Alright, thank you. Okay, so I've redone a new disc, obviously, since the first one, although it went well, didn't record very well, due to, I don't know if it was user error or malfunction of a camera, I don't know. But as you can see, I've redrawn Gladys on this disc here. Came out pretty much the same. The only problem I have with this disc is it's the only disc I had available that I could really dye at the time. And if you look on the back, you can see the disc, the variation in color is very close to the contact paper. It's slightly yellowed, but that's just the underside. The top side is closer to white, so I'm hoping it comes out good on camera, but we shall see. But I think it's important to show the step, so I'm going to redo the process all over again. Alright, so let's get started and see how it turns out. Okay, so here we got our sketched image, and we're going to make sure that we have our guide image here so we know what's black and what isn't, so we can cut out the right sections. I use an X-Acto knife. They do have swivel blades on some. This is just a straight blade. But let's start cutting here. I'm going to work in sections. I don't cut the whole thing out at one time because you don't want to accidentally forget a line, because when you start pulling it off and you missed a line, then you're going to end up stretching out the contact paper in areas. So let me just cut out this one little section of black here. Okay, so now we're going to start to peel this off real carefully and see how we can see this come. Oh, alright, yeah, we can see the disc underneath pretty well. So the area you're pulling off will be the black, because that's what we're going to dye. The white part we're going to leave on, obviously, to block the dye from contacting the disc in those areas. So we're going to start taking out this larger section on the side. Alright, now we're going to pull this off and see how this looks. Oops, see, I got a little snag here. I didn't get a nice clean cut. Hold that down. And there we go. Now, you got all these little sections here. Now for these lines, being as thin as they are, what I like to do is I like to go down one side and then go down the other side. And so it's not going to be super thin, but it'll definitely be a lot thinner than what you've been doing. Just be very careful. Take your time. Don't push too hard. The first line is easy. The second line you're going to want to follow the other cut. So hold the disc where you can see the cut easily, and that'll make it easier. It's not going to be perfect straight the whole way down. You might have the line thicker in some parts than others, but it really won't be that noticeable. Pull this up real carefully. And there you go, small thin line. Just need to do this one little line right here. Oops, last line. So here we go. We have the final cutout of the head part. All the lines are cut out. We've managed to leave all the little artifacts of white in here. We've got all this left to do. Okay, so after the cutting process is complete, we have you can see it's all cut out, all on the edge here. Okay, and if you look underneath, I actually cut it all the way off. Now, when this goes in the dye, it's going to go like that. The dye is not going to go up and over, but you do want to be careful. You don't want to get any dye inside this area because it will dye the disc in splotches, so be careful. So we'll move on to the dye process. Okay, I lost the audio on this file, so I'm doing a voiceover, so apologize if things don't sync up right. Got 4 cups of water here in this pot. They used to use RIT dye, but they have a new formula now, and it does no longer dye the plastic on these golf discs. So if you can find their old formula in the powder dye, then by all means you can use that, but it's getting harder and harder to find. I use iDye for mine. It works really well, and it comes pretty quick. I'll give you a site that I ordered from. It comes from California, and it gets here in a couple days, and I live in Ohio, so that's not too bad. It comes with a packet of powder dye, and then it comes with this color intensifier. I don't use the color intensifier. I find that the powder dye works just fine the way it is. If you want to experiment with it, by all means go ahead, but I personally don't use it. It comes in a few colors. The iDye Poly, which is what you want. They do have regular iDye, but you want the Poly. It does come in a select few colors. So here they are here. Just basic colors, green, purple, orange, yellow, brown, and black. Red, I think, too. Get her stirred up, dissolved. You don't want it super hot. Just enough where you got some steam rolling off. Once you get to the point where you start to see the steam forming, go ahead and turn her down as low as you possibly can. And that should be good enough. You don't want it too hot, because then you'll have bubbles start to form on the bottom of your disc, and that can screw up your dye. And if you spend a lot of time working on a design, you don't want to screw it up at this point. So here I've made a makeshift handle on my disc here. This helps me to pick it up and put it down without having to mess with the edge of the disc, because you don't want to tip it and then have the dye get inside the disc there. So we're going to drop her in here. There we go. The tension on the water will really kind of hold it above the dye there. It'll float there on the top. Now you want to put it in for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15. Probably, I think I did this for 15 minutes. Different kinds of plastic dye differently. So some require a little more time in the bath than others. I know the first attempt I did, it didn't take a whole lot of time, but this harder plastic takes a little bit longer. So we're going to let this sit in here for about, I think, 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll see how she turned out. It's been 15 minutes, so whatever's done's done. I'm going to pull it up and see the not super dark black, but I wasn't surprised considering the type of plastic we're looking at. But you'd be surprised. So I'm going to pull this out. I'll bring this over to the sink. I'm just going to rinse her off. But you can see how clean that is once I pull that off. It's not going to be pitch black. Turn it off. There she is. Okay, so here is the finished disc, the re-dye that I had to do. You can see it's not like a dark black, but here is, oops, the one that I originally started out with. You see how nice and crisp and dark that is? Well, that's because of the kind of plastic that you're dyeing. This, while the image is still pretty clear, it's the plastic. This is a harder plastic, and it's harder for that pigment to get in there. It doesn't mean you can't dye these kinds of plastic. It just means you're not going to get the same kind of reaction. If I were using like a color, like, I don't know, red or blue, it's not going to be a very vibrant red or blue. It's going to be very light dye. If you did it on this kind of plastic, this sort of translucent, softer plastic, you're going to notice it's going to take a lot faster and a lot darker. I really wish we could have just gone with this original one, but you know, I guess it is kind of good to show you the two variations here in the reactions the plastics have to the dye. But there you have it. I mean, it came out pretty close the same both times, with the exception of the you know, vibrance of the black. But I hope that helps, and I hope to start seeing other people getting into this.
Chickens.